Breaking the Silence is a podcast that dives into the intricate and often challenging topics of grief and loss within relationships. Through insightful discussions, the podcast aims to explore how pain can be transformed into purpose, leading to healing and growth. By addressing themes such as inner child work and the journey towards feeling alive once more, this podcast offers a beacon of hope for those navigating difficult emotions. Ultimately, Breaking the Silence aims to guide listeners towards moving forward and embracing all the blessings that life has in store as they embark on a journey of self-discovery and spiritual fulfillment. I'm your guide through this journey, Renee Wallace, and I invite you to join me as we break the silence surrounding grief and loss, transforming pain into purpose and finding hope in the healing power of storytelling. Welcome, my beautiful friends. I'm so excited to have you here, and I'm so excited to have a guest with us today. And I want to share first how I even came to know Tasha. I came across her on TikTok, and she was such like a breath of fresh air, even just seeing so many things that I was so confused about for so long and it making so much sense to me. Like, she was the piece of the puzzle that helped me make sense of so many things. And so I have loved following your journey, first of all. And it's just been incredible. It's been incredible to watch your growth. It's been incredible, all the things that you share and we learn from you and from your journey. And it's been, did you start that account like maybe a couple of years ago, or when did you really start sharing? Because I feel like it's probably been a couple of years now.
Not even. No.
Not even.
No, not at all. First, I just want to thank you for having me on your podcast. Before we even start, and I just want to say it's my first time ever being a guest on a podcast.
Oh, I love it. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. But yeah, I started this last March.
Okay.
As it just passed a year. And it was totally a fluke, a complete fluke. I have a skincare company, and the guy who was doing my ads was telling me, make a TikTok, talk about your products. TikTok is amazing. So I started making videos about cream and I hated it. It was so not me. So I went back to him and I was like, listen, I don't want to do this. It feels unnatural. It doesn't feel like it's going to work. And he's like, you know what? Just make a personal TikTok. Have people like you. And then once they like you, you can introduce it. And I was like, you know what? I think I can do that. So on my 5th video, I spoke about avoidant attachment style, and it completely blew up. It hit like over 1 million views, I think, in a week's time.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was the moment I realized, like, okay, clearly this is something that people are resonating with. This is something that people want to know more about. Mm-hmm. And I realized that a lot of the people in the comments were anxious folks that are dealing with somebody who is avoidant and who had a plethora of questions for me as to why their partner was behaving this way and why they were saying that thing. And so, yeah, that kind of opened the door to a completely new direction.
Yes. And it's been incredible watching it. So let me ask you, let's just sort of start at the beginning. Like, when did you first realize that you had, because you at first felt like you were dismissive avoidant, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And so when did you first realize that you had, that you were dismissive avoidant?
I don't know if one realizes that. Well, I'm sure a lot of them do. I personally never realized that I was dismissive avoidant. It was more like, this is the way I am. This is the way I've been. This is the way I'm going to be. And the fact that you have needs and that you need more of me is a you problem. Is kind of a difficult spot to be for a dismissive avoidant and for their partner, because there's absolutely no accountability and no willingness to change. You can't change anything if you're not willing to look at the role that you're playing in the dynamic.
Right.
Yeah. So that was my dismissive avoidant journey. I had no idea I was dismissive. I thought it was everybody else's problem.
Okay. And so then, even back then, did you even have any awareness or not yet of like, or should I say, did you feel like, well, I guess not, because you said you felt like it was everybody else's problem. So you didn't have the feeling of like, I'm defective or there's something wrong with me. You thought it was them completely.
Actually, it was like, I think you're needing too much of me on the surface level. And then a little bit under that was, maybe there's something wrong with me a little bit. You know what? This is just the way I am. It was like explained or like pushed aside by this concept of, it is what it is. This is me. And so by hiding under that excuse, I never took accountability because it's like, this is the way it is and this is the way it's going to be. And you know what? Maybe there is something wrong with me, but I'm not willing to look at it. I'm just going to slap a label on it and just move on with my life.
So then how did that work out in relationships then for you back then as a dismissive avoidant?
When I was very highly dismissive, I tended to attract anxious people, which propelled me forward in the dismissive direction because they made it very easy for me to blame. You know, if they would respond in an out-of-pocket way that I felt was like, okay, you're needy, like you need a lot. It was a perfect scapegoat because I'd be like, see, like if you weren't like this, I wouldn't be like this.
Right.
You're pushing me away because of all of that. And so I would attract people that validated my belief about myself and about the dynamics that I was in.
So then when or how did you discover that you eventually were dismissive avoidant? Like, how did you stumble across that?
So it's an interesting thing. I never stumbled across the realization that I was dismissive. What ended up happening is that I met a person who became my partner who triggered fearful avoidance in me for the first time. And once I became fearful avoidant, which is you're adding in the element of anxiety, that is when I started recognizing, oh, okay, interesting. Something is wrong with me. Even though nothing was ever wrong, that was like the realization, oh shit, something is going on with me and I need to figure out what this is. But until that partner came along, I was very deflective, which is the essence of dismissive avoidance is you dismiss and you avoid. So I really like lived that while I was a DA.
So what do you think then? So with this partner that came along that triggered the FA part of you, why do you think that is?
It's interesting because, okay, when I was young, that is when I went through the trauma that obviously caused all of these defense mechanisms. That's, I think, the case for a lot of people.
Right.
When I was young, I was incredibly terrified of abandonment. I would stay up late at night. I couldn't fall asleep because I had debilitating panic attacks. So what I would do is I would like sleep with my ear next to the door, needing to hear my parents talking because there was this belief that when I would wake up in the morning, they would be gone. So I needed to hear their voices in order to fall asleep. And this came from when I was 6 months old. My mom had to drop me off at my grandparents because she had to go back to work. And it's something as simple as that. Like it's a life circumstance. There was nothing, no abuse, nothing crazy that occurred. But I just wasn't ready to be separated from my mom at 6 months. That's all that happened. I would yell. I would freak out every time she would drop me off. And so that ended up developing into a fear of abandonment.
Wow.
And the anxiety was so intense. I think I saw my first psychologist. I must have been 6 years old. My parents dropped me off there and they were like, hey, there's something going on here. Like all of these symptoms are really intense. And what ended up happening is I think my system was so tired. My nervous system was so tired of being anxious all the time that as I grew older, I developed all of these mechanisms in order to push that anxiety down because I couldn't function in the world. Like I remember stepping outside in the world, I would be getting my hair washed at a hairdresser. And as she's washing my hair, I would have a panic attack. I was panicking all of the time as a young kid. So I got older. My system was like, enough is enough with this. You're too vulnerable. It doesn't work. It subconsciously pushed down all of the anxiety and created this personality, this nonchalant, this very easygoing, very chill, very funny, charismatic. I created a whole personality. Of course, I didn't realize I was doing this, but that became who I was. And you could tell that my things would come out in relationships, because as soon as I would be in a relationship with someone, it's like, intimacy, don't even come near me. I don't trust. You can't come near me. And that was where the dismissive avoidance. Right. And I tended to attract partners that had their own things, very anxious. I could, again, put the blame on them, and I could live on in this thing where I never really had to address my things. So that all changed when I met my last partner. I met this person, and what ended up happening is he was so incredible. He was so kind, so loving, so everyone loved this person. He created communities. He was successful. He was beautiful inside and out, just like all the things that one would want. Okay. And the moment I met him, I put him on this pedestal. I was like, oh my God, this person, he's so incredible. And by putting him on this pedestal and seeing him as the amazing person that he was, naturally, I put myself down here looking up at him.
Right.
And it triggered this concept or this idea that, oh my God, I'm not good enough for this person.
Right.
And as soon as that trigger came, or that realization set in, my fearful avoidance was triggered, and I started freaking out. I was anxious all the time, terrified that I was going to sabotage it, that I was going to ruin it, that he was going to leave me, that he was going to wake up and realize, you know what, she's not good enough, that he would abandon me. And that's where it started.
That is so good. So a couple things about that. Like, I definitely I should maybe address that now so I don't forget. Like, I think that is a very common thing of that. And then you end up, I'm assuming, and we can get into that, ultimately end up sabotaging it, correct? So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy of like the fear of what you're thinking, like they're going to figure out who I am. They're going to figure out I'm not good enough for them, and they're going to leave me, which might be the very furthest thing from, like, he might have absolutely adored you, right? And just want, and it's funny, like I say this, but I know in all the attachment stuff that, like, they just want to love you, and you can almost feel like, why won't you let me love you? And at the same time, you're probably like, what do you mean? I am letting you. I'm trying to let you love me.
I'm trying my best.
Right?
That's
But then I wanted to go back and just touch on how you said, like, with you, it wasn't really something that was like majorly traumatic that created it all for you as a child. And I think that's important for people to know, because sometimes they might think, what? I had like a pretty normal childhood, nothing major happened. Like, now in mine, yeah, there was some trauma and some different things that I can see it and be like, yes, that's where it started from. But for you, just something as simple as a life thing of, yeah, your mom taking you to childcare and that triggering it. So I think that's important for people to realize that it doesn't have to be some major thing that happens, some major life event.
Totally. A lot of people will downplay the things because they're like, oh, it can't be that. Like, so many other people go through so much more. Like,
right,
I've had a good life. And by doing that, you actually deny those parts of yourself that very much did go through something traumatic for you. And when you downplay your experiences and invalidate them, you actually perpetuate them, because all those parts want. And when I say those parts, for me, it's that tiny little baby part of me that just wanted to feel safe. If I deny that part and say, shut up, you had a good life, it's like I'm abandoning that part, just like it felt like it was abandoned by my parents. And I end up perpetuating that abandonment, which makes it that I'm not safe with myself. And therefore, I have this insecure attachment to myself that I continue to project and live with my partners. So it just becomes this cycle of self-abandonment.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that I realized in all the work that I've done was I had this fear of, because I'm an FA and I'm working really hard to become more and more secure, but I realized, like, I had this fear of betrayal and a trust wound. I did not trust people. And then ultimately what it came down to, I figured out for myself as I was working through my stuff, is that I couldn't trust myself,
So how could I trust anybody else if I wasn't willing to trust myself first and like step into that and see my wounds and acknowledge them? And the same thing too with the abandonment thing. Like I would abandon myself for the sake of like, say, a relationship or something, you know? Like so like wanting to be there for them and help them. And I've so learned that you can't fix people and they have to choose change all on their own. But years ago, I absolutely was in that place of like, and not even that you realize it consciously, you know, you're not doing it on a conscious level, but you somehow think like, I can help, like I can, you know, subconsciously think that you can fix anything, you know?
Absolutely.
So anyways, that's so then what happened? So you met this guy and he was amazing and great and triggered some things for you. What happened from there then?
Yeah, it just became this loop where, like you said before, it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm so terrified that I am not good enough for this person. And I like what you said, there's this fear of betrayal or lack of trust, which I always felt as well. It's like we had been betrayed in some form. Like it's like when I needed you most, you kind of left me there. Right. So I don't trust that you're going to show up for me. It's almost like we were victimized. We were these victims, and we were victims at some point in our life. And we perpetuate that victimhood. It's like, I don't trust you. And then at the same time, like you said, if we're not building that trust with ourselves, we are expecting somebody, we become small. And it's like, you need to become that person who's going to make me feel safe, which perpetuates the victimhood in the first place. So coming into our own power and building that relationship with ourselves is what restores all of that wholeness. But yeah, it was this sense of, I kept sabotaging because I kept acting from this place of fear. My deepest fear was that I was going to be left, or that I was going to ruin it, or that he wasn't going to be able to hold me. And every time I acted from that place of fear, which I did all the time, I was ultra reactive to my fear. The moment I felt some sort of discomfort or an intrusive thought of he's going to leave me for that girl, I would shoot him a look. And it was always like this anger I had towards him, almost like I was projecting my anger on him and making it his fault, which is like what I think, not every FA, but a lot of FAs will be angry with their partner and make it their fault for our triggers. And so he, over time, was just like kind of pulling away from that. He's like, you keep hurting me. You keep hurting me. I'm just trying to love you. But I couldn't perceive it because I was so taken over by my own fears. Ultimately, we didn't end up together. I kept leaving him. I couldn't commit to the relationship. Every time I was in it, it was so overwhelmingly painful for me that I just kept pushing him away. And the last time I went back to him, which was very recent actually, where I feel like I'd done enough work on myself to be able to sustain a relationship with this person, I was like, listen, I'm ready. He looked at me and he was like, I don't trust you. You've hurt me so many times. I don't know if I can open up my heart to you again. So ultimately, I broke my own heart, which was the fear that I had all along. And I think that's a testament to the fact that we attract the thing that we fear most unless we go inside and address those wounds so that we can stop being so reactive to those parts of us that are afraid, because they really do attract that thing to you.
So how did you then realize, I mean, so you had this dynamic that you know, probably where he would come close and you would pull away, and you said you like ended it multiple times. How did you then, at what point did you figure out like what's going on? Like, you started to have a moment of like, okay, maybe there is something with me. And then when did you discover like fearful avoidant? Like how did you come across that? Like I found it on TikTok and like, oh my gosh.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I had been in this push-pull with him for years. Okay. And I had been explosive, and there was obviously something up with me that I knew. And I would always tell him like, there's something wrong with me. I don't know how to do this. You know, it was a very talked about subject. And one day he came home and he was super excited. He was like, I think I figured it out. I was like, what? He's like, the reason we're in this situation, like I figured it out. And he proceeded to tell me, I think you have borderline personality disorder. And I looked at him and I was like, we're done. And I packed up the entire condo and I left. I was so upset. I was like, how dare he tell me I have some sort of mental condition? Like that's completely out of pocket. I ended up cooling off. I went to a friend's, went back home, told him like, listen, I don't think it's that. That's like really intense. And he was like, I'm so sorry. In this week that we hadn't been talking, I bought this book and I think I actually figured out what it is. And he handed me Attached. That book, it changed my life. I read it and it's almost like when you put a label on why you've been the way you've been, it makes it feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. There is a book written on me. Like there's somebody took the time to write a book on me, textbook, which means that it exists. I'm not crazy. And that was such a validating experience for me. And it gave me so much hope because I recognized if this is a thing that exists and people have it, that means there's a solution. And that for me was the turning point. That's actually when I started making the TikToks because I just kept like absorbing all of this information about avoidance, about anxiousness, about fearful avoidance. And the thing in that book, there is not a lot written on fearful avoidance. So it was really just about anxious and avoidant. And I was just blasting that out because I felt like if I read this and it completely changed the trajectory of my healing, I need to share this with other people. Like people need to hear this.
Yeah, I think that that was it for me too. Like, first of all, I just think God is really good in the way of like, just for me to stumble across something on TikTok, you know, that you're not even realizing you're looking for, and to stumble across it and just be like, wait, this sort of sounds familiar and like I can relate to this. And you sort of go down that rabbit hole then, you know, just of like consuming as much content as you can. And again, yeah, the book Attached was like life-changing for me, just in that looking at a relationship and, you know, my own life. And it just started to make my whole entire life make sense of like everything. Not even, and I know you've talked about this before, not even just in relationships, like romantic relationships, but in, say, like business pursuits or friendships or family. I could see it showing up in different ways throughout that. Whereas like, say, for example, for me, maybe in a romantic relationship, and again, of course, it depends on what their attachment style is, but I could see me maybe tending to be attracted to an avoidant and then me showing up more anxious. But yet in like friendship or family, it could be more, especially more like my extended family, like more the avoidance side of it, you know? So it was just interesting to see that, and also to see that play out in business, you know, and in like pursuits of like that way of like the fear of, is it all going to fall apart, you know?
Yes. It's, I think that comes back down to the self-trust.
Yeah.
Too. Like in business, like what you brought up earlier, it's, oh my gosh, am I going to mess this up? Am I able to do this? And it comes down to so much evidence over time of having fallen prey to the triggers and having fallen into the same loop. You develop this idea about yourself that this is how it's always been. So I don't know myself doing anything any other way. Right? So yeah, it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy that is difficult to break through. But once we start understanding, okay, everything that I'm doing is from this place of fear, how can I learn to make space for the fear instead of knee-jerk react? Fear comes up and it's like, I used to react immediately. There was no space in between. It's, I'm afraid, I'm yelling. I'm afraid, I'm packing my bags. I'm afraid, I'm panicking. I'm afraid I'm not showing up to this podcast thing because I think I'm going to mess it up. So I'm just not going to go. So it became this like this instant reaction. Whereas once you start understanding, okay, I have fear. It's valid fear. It comes from a place that I went through something, and that experience is so valid. And if I spend time with that, I can build a relationship to the fear so that when it comes up and I know, okay, fear is coming up, I know that whenever fear arises, I feel this urgency. I feel this disconnect. I feel these tingles. Okay, it's happening. there's like a pattern interrupt. Instead of reacting right away, you can kind of call it out and say, oh, right now I'm feeling fear. This is my cue to do absolutely nothing. Do nothing right now and sit and get under the fear. What is the belief that I have right now? I'm afraid that I'm not good enough and that I'm going to mess this up. Okay, how can I sit with that instead of knee-jerk react and basically perpetuate it in my external world? Like, that's what needs to stop.
Yes, I can so relate to that. Even where I was just sharing with you before we even started recording, like now even things happening that are maybe healthy and good and what things should be like, you can feel it sort of come up in you because it's unfamiliar, right?
Mm-hmm.
And learning to like acknowledge that, at least when you have the self-awareness to acknowledge like, okay, like I see what's going on there, and acknowledging that wound that was in there, that little girl, and saying, but that's not where we are now. And, leaning in to and making different choices, and I love what you even say about like the moment of doing nothing, like when you're like want to panic for a minute and like, oh my gosh, what is this? I abort mission, or whatever. But just stop and do nothing and gather yourself and then sort of lean in to something different and new. So I think that it can definitely still, of course, be scary because new is scary, right?
Absolutely. It's paying attention to getting to know yourself in those states and building a relationship to yourself in those states. So when I get into the fearful state, I notice my thoughts going everywhere. So it's like your system doesn't want to deal with the fear itself. It's so scared of the fear, it's going to do everything that it can to get you out of it. If you have a deep fear of something, it'll say, okay, you need to yell at this person because that's going to make it that your deep fear won't come true because you're going to run away first. Or, it'll give you all kinds of ideas in order to not face the fear itself, in order to evacuate yourself from the potential of that fear coming true. So it's really about noticing, okay, my thoughts are getting frazzled. Movement is being frazzled. I have this urge to be urgent right now. That is your cue to slow it down. But yeah, it's building a relationship to yourself to understand your cues.
Do you feel like how did that go with, okay, well, let me ask you this, like, what would you encourage other people if they're just discovering for the first time that they might be dismissive, fearful, avoid, anxious, it doesn't matter. They're just learning about their attachment style and seeing like, wait, I see that my relationships haven't really always been healthy. What would you even encourage them to do? Like, what would be like the first steps?
The first steps, I think, would be to isolate what is it that I'm afraid of. Because I believe that everything that comes of our attachment style, it comes from a place of fear. There is a base fear that is driving every single behavior. So once you can establish what that fear is, you can notice where it comes through in your day-to-day life, in your relationships. What happens when we're living in a state of unconsciousness is that we're in knee-jerk reaction to fear, but our system is hiding what that fear is from us. So oftentimes we project, you're not giving me enough, so it's your fault. Or you're giving me too much, so it's your fault. Where if you just look a couple of layers under that, it's, I don't feel like my needs are being met because right now I'm feeling like you're about to leave me and I'm terrified of that. Like if you just look under a couple levels, you'll notice it's not really the thing that you're fighting for that you need. It's that there's something under that's running the behavior or running what you're asking for. So just isolating what that is kind of helps you see a little bit more clearly what you're actually dealing with. And it helps you take accountability for it instead of pinning it on the other person. It's your job to make me feel good. And if you don't make me feel good, well, like it's your fault that we're in the situation that we're in, which ultimately is a very powerless place to be because you're putting all of the onus on somebody else. And the reality is we don't have control over how somebody else shows up. It's just, it's a losing game.
Absolutely. And I shared a little bit in my podcast when I started talking about attachment theory that my whole passion began with the fact that I had met someone. And that's where it felt, and it's interesting because you think at the time, like, it's sort of what you're saying, like, I was thinking it was them, like, what is going on? Like, they keep pulling away. And there was the push-pull dynamic, like, pull away, come back, pull away, come back. And in the work that I've done, I realized my role in that we were just ultimately triggering each other, right? Like, he needed space and I would try to come close. And is there feedback sound for you, or is it just on my end?
I don't hear it.
Oh,
No.
maybe it's just here. Okay. But anyways, you realize that's when I think you have that moment of accountability of like, here's my role in it. And you realize you can't fix anybody else or change them. And I knew that all along anyways. I learned that years ago. But I think that in those moments, you then get to be accountable for yourself and really focus on healing your own wounds to then show up differently. And maybe then be able to meet somebody, maybe then you can meet at a level place, or not even that, but, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, that you show up differently and maybe then they feel safer to slowly start to open up. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's not a guarantee, but
For sure.
stop blaming somebody else, it's your fault. And then they're going, no, but it's your fault. You end up in this loop where one is pushing, one is pulling, one is pushing, one is pulling all the time. When one person stops acting from their place of fear, begins addressing the fears at the root and showing up in an entirely new way, there is an opportunity for change because the other person might actually feel that the dynamic is safer. And as a result, they feel like they can open up to you because they're not constantly being like attacked, let's say. But it also shows you that you're in a relationship with someone who is not willing to change. That's what, a lot of people are in relationships and they're like pulling teeth. Please give me love. Please love me. Like, I just need this and I'll feel better. And they never get it.
Right.
But when you stop doing that and you show up in your whole and you're doing you either give a person an opportunity to love you because they're like, okay, you're not constantly making me feel like I'm not enough and like I'm not giving enough and you make me want to push away. Now they can love you, or they were never willing to do it.
Right.
And you're going to get your answer regardless.
Absolutely.
By you showing up whole, you get all the answers that you need to move forward. And when you make it to that point, you will have the strength to walk away because you're going to recognize, okay, I know who I am. I know what I want. I know the life that I want to live with the partner I want to be with. This doesn't necessarily fit. So at this point, I'm able to walk away. Whereas before, it was just the relationship was tugging at those abandonment wounds. You just want that person's love so bad in order to feel whole. Imagine the pressure that puts on another person. You need me to survive at that point. Like, that's too much for me to bear, especially as an avoidant person. I don't even know how to deal with my emotions. Now I'm supposed to hold your existence or else you're not okay. It's like, we can't rely on each other to survive. And when we're acting from our place of fear, our place of abandonment, we are expecting somebody else to hold us because we can't stand on our own 2 feet.
Right. And I think there's the moment that once you've done the work, and I believe it's absolutely an ongoing journey of healing. I think we just keep getting to the next level of like, because if you think about it, these wounds have been there our whole entire life, right? So there's just layer upon layer. If you think of like a croissant, it's just like so many layers there. But you get to that point that I think then can say, I've done everything I feel like I can to meet this person there. And like you said, if they're not willing to even meet, you can walk away knowing I did everything I possibly could to reach them.
That's a good feeling.
It is.
Like, I've actually done everything I can here.
And you can walk away having peace of like, I really tried to meet you there. And then also, I think a big misconception, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too. People will often say like, well, if they wanted to, they would. And I think that is such a huge misconception because I think a lot of times they really do want to. It's a capacity issue. Like they just, especially if you think about, I'm thinking more like even in dismissive avoidant, like I think it's a capacity issue of that they aren't sure how to do it. And as a dismissive avoidant, if they had the experience of nobody teaching them how to express their emotions or that it was safe to or okay to say, hey, this is what I need or this is what I want. They don't know how to do it.
No
They
idea.
totally freak out. Like, this feels so unsafe to me right now.
Yes. Yes. The thing about a dismissive avoidant is that a big fear is that I'm not able to be the person that you want me to be because we don't have the capacity in that state to be that person. So now we end up with someone who is constantly pointing out how we fall short, which validates our biggest fear that we're not good in relationships. And so we're like, okay, well, I can't make you happy. Like, I just don't know how to make you happy. Like, I just don't have it. I don't know what it is. So by removing that pressure and allowing that person to be imperfect and, show up kind of in the way that they show up and just being like, hey, I get it. It's okay. You give that person a safe space to feel like, okay, in this dynamic, I don't fall short. Maybe now I feel safe to open. And that's what gives you your answer as to whether you're with a dismissive avoidant that just needs a little bit of love, that just needs a little bit of acceptance for who they are. A lot of us, that's all we need is just a safe space to land where we don't feel like we're falling short for the first time in our lives. And that will cause them to blossom. There are other dismissive avoidants it's not gonna change anything. But the only way you're gonna know is by not constantly telling them like, you're not enough. You're not giving me this. You're not giving me that. Give yourself that. Show them that it's okay for them to kind of just exist. Set a timeline on it so it doesn't feel like you're doing it indefinitely. And see if you could create that space for them to feel like for the first time ever, they don't fall short, that they are okay, just exactly as they are. Love really does transform a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think that's huge because I don't think maybe a lot of times we realize it, and especially for a dismissive avoidant, because they are highly sensitive to any kind of criticism. They probably experienced a lot of criticism growing up. So even when maybe and I can think back in a situation of where I'm sure it came across looking back now very critical of what is going on here? Like, what are you doing? I don't understand. One minute you're here and then I don't hear from you for a couple weeks and I can remember even saying things like that, and that again, I'm sure triggered the wound of I don't know how to do this. I just, I can't get it right. And then when you move into that space, like you said, of holding space and just saying, I see you for who you are. I'm okay. Holding space for them of I like you for you, and not this fantasy version of who you could be in the future.
Yes.
Any of that, just I see you exactly as you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. You do definitely get your answer, I think. I mean, it's a beautiful thing, I think, if you can, meet each other in that place and they feel safe enough, then I can breathe for a change. I don't feel like I'm for lack of better words, such a failure at this,
Exactly. I think a lot of it comes down to communicating with curiosity versus judgment.
Yeah.
And when we're in a triggered state of anxiety, often it's this judgment, why are you like this? That's such a judgmental way of putting it because it's you're hurting me. Why are you like this? Why can't you be this other thing? And so in all of that, all you're saying is there's something wrong with you. You're not enough, all of those things. You're falling short. When we communicate with curiosity instead, it's hey, when you go, when you're gone, I'm curious, what's your experience if you want to share? Now you're actually asking to be led into what their experience is, not because you're judging it, but because you're genuinely curious about what it is that this person experiences. And that feels a lot safer. And that, I think, I mean, I would open up to somebody who is curious about my experience versus someone who's like reprimanding me for being, for behaving the way that I do.
Yes, I think that's huge. And that is something even I am working very much on, like coming from a curious place, of just, yeah, tell me more, just sort of, I want to know your experience.
Yeah.
And that non-critical communication, and that just opens up, I think, people so much more to feel like maybe it is safe to share,
Maybe it's okay for me to be the way that I am, and like I can be me here. And ironically, when you allow someone to be themselves in a loving way, they grow. Like, we're meant to blossom. We're meant to be love versus fear. But the more we project our fear onto other people, the more they recluse in fear as well. And now we got two people operating from the place of fear. If one person can transform that to, okay, curiosity, love, openness, it really does inspire another person to step into who they actually are. Because we are love. We are meant to be open. We are meant to trust. We are meant to hold ourselves and all of those things. It's just all the layers that we've accumulated because of our experiences that cause us to recluse.
Right.
So feeling safe allows us to drop the guard and become the person that we are at the core.
I love that.
Okay, so I'm going to end part 1 there, and we'll pick up with part 2 next week. What I would encourage you to take away from today, there was so much good stuff in there, but especially at the end there, just talking about coming from a place of curiosity. And that is still definitely something that I am working on too. I actually can just think this past weekend where I spoke with someone, and like looking back in things that I said, I'm like, oh, I would have liked to have seen myself come from more of a curious place of asking them what their experience was and giving them the opportunity to open up. And I share that to say, if you recognize that, that's not a time for us to shame ourselves, because remember, shame keeps us stuck. But it is a time to just recognize, okay, well, there's a place that I could have done better. And so like to be aware to work on that in the next opportunity, because, there's always room for growth, and we get do-overs of, hopefully moving forward in our communication with people. So I send you off with so much love until next week, and we'll pick up with part 2. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Breaking the Silence. As we conclude our time together, let us carry forward the stories we've heard, the emotions we've shared, and the connections we've forged. Remember, the journey through grief and loss is not one we walk alone. In the silence, we find solidarity. In our shared experiences, we find strength. And in our vulnerability, we find resilience. If you or someone you know is navigating the complexities of grief, know that there is support available. Reach out, lean on your community, and remember that healing is not linear. It's a journey, and you are not alone. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. And thank you for being a part of this community. Until next time, may you find peace in the spaces between the silence. Please be sure to subscribe below and leave us a review. If you'd like to connect further, you can find me on Instagram at Coaching with Renee.